Thank you. It's great that everybody's come out tonight. It's, as I say, it's sad about Lynn. We still have some coffee and some juice and cookies, so you're very welcome to stay. If there are any questions from the floor, we would like to hear questions. Simon?
I was going to say, mine wasn't a question, so somebody else.
Yeah.
My name's Lorna Jacob. I live on Brownville. I was on the executive for many years, and at one point I was the representative for the MDCA on Metrolinx Noise Wall Committee. We had many meetings with multiple levels of government and representatives of Metrolinx over the years, and that is to establish a noise wall between the train, the railway corridor, and the residences. The whole thing was supposed to be completed before the Pan Am Games in the summer of 2015. They got as far as Eglinton, going from, their commitment was to go from Jane to Black Creek Drive. They got as far as Eglinton and they quit. The construction of the platforms behind the homes on Brownville has been a very difficult and ongoing situation. They're still out there in the daytime, they're still out there at night, and we're talking about 11 years that they've been working at this point. The noise wall has never been put in from Eglinton southbound. We were told that this would happen. At one point, Metrolinx, when they were contacted by MDCA, there was something about some properties that were encroaching. The property owners got together, got a lawyer, and that was determined not to be relevant. Metrolinx didn't pursue it. However, we have no noise wall. Property is 30 feet deep from the back of the house. Then you have the width of about this far, and then there's platform 1, platform 2, and platform 3. We need the noise wall to be completed as promised to the community, because at this point there's just people's own little wood fences and chain link, whatever you have. And another thing Metrolinx did was that they excavated the bank behind the homes. At one point it was down 20 feet. They backfilled. It's about 12 feet deep. They excavated it about 88 degrees straight down. Never put in a retaining wall. Haven't got the noise wall built. And these platforms are nearing completion. I would like to request that for the residents of Brownville Avenue and the future residents that will be going south on Weston Road, that this be put in as committed, and that MDCA take action to push this issue forward, because otherwise people will be suffering for years to come. It's been very difficult for 10 years to have all this malarkey going on. In addition to that, the community green space, that's the extension of Bar Avenue, that Metrolinx had meetings with the community requesting permission and receiving it through the councillor, that they would be just using that for access to the tracks. There would be no construction, there would be no structures, there would be no vehicle parking, there would be nothing. That has meant nothing. And all of the things they said they wouldn't do has been done. But the noise wall needs to go in. Before they open the station, and we've got people all standing up and down and the train stopping with all the like 40 beeps every time the train comes into the station, and then the bells going and the doors and the windows. It needs to happen for the protection of the residents.
What's the MPP doing?
No, nothing's happened at all for a long time.
It seems that would be the place to...
I was in touch with the previous MPP, and they said that it was supposed to be done by 2021. That was the last date I was told.
Who's the MPP? Rob?
No, it was the previous,
Not Rob.
it was the previous Hassan. Hassan. They did their background inquisition and came back with that date. Nothing's happened.
But who is it now? Ford.
We do Ford guys.
So that's who is in government. So that would be,
Well, something needs to happen bigger than me. I was very involved for a long time, but
sounds like you need some help.
it's been hell living there.
Sounds bad.
Thank you.
Okay. One thing I will state is that dealing with Metrolinx has been a nightmare. We started dealing with Go, and then there was UPX, and then there was Crosstown and Metrolinx.
There was MDCA before that.
Yeah. And then there was the Crosstown Crosslinks, and now there's Crosstown Extension, and they moved the staff around, and the different contractors come through, and then we get told that the contract is finished and the people have gone away and it's completed, and there's nobody to talk to. There's not even an empty desk because the office now houses some other department, and it has been horrible. The only way we really had a good response was when our MPP could get access at the top levels of Metrolinx, and currently we're not getting support from our MPP, and that really is where we have to focus. But it's not happening, and it's not just us that are complaining about this.
If that's one of the key issues in the neighborhood in terms of development and unkept promises, could that become a priority commitment of the association?
Yeah, as Francis just said though, there was a plan for Mount Dennis, and now some developers have appealed that the plan is at odds with the provincial Build Everything Faster and Steamroller the Residents Act. So, who do you go to when the guy that is supposed to protect us is the guy that's saying, oh yeah, we can build the massive buildings in your backyard?
Right, I think we owe the neighborhood, I mean, when we used to have the newsletters, we would give updates of the neighborhood as to where the planning study is and all that. I know we don't have the vehicle for the printed newsletters anymore, but at least maybe we could do some of those op-ed pieces on the website, just so we keep more eyes on it, because I didn't know it was appealed.
Yeah, I didn't know
Until she said it, and that was news. And we were on top of things back in the day, and we would share it with the community. But we don't have that.
Aren't you new guys glad you joined?
Yeah, no, but we have to get that going.
Yeah,
again.
Lorna?
Okay, the only thing that I can think of in terms of leverage is when I hear the proposal by Metrolinx and how that they're having all these meetings with community groups that are along the Ontario line that's supposed to go from the CNE to the Science Center, and they're making promises to those people left, right, and center. I think the only leverage we would have is to go to their meetings and say, don't listen to them, they're lying to you. They'll have these community meetings that they're required to have, where they have to check off the boxes they've had the meetings. But nobody's held accountable because they've changed the format of the meetings. It used to be they would have a meeting, they would have a stage, people would come and sit in the audience, they'd make a presentation, people would be able to ask questions from the floor and have some accountability. They changed the whole format, so when you go to these meetings, it's just walk around the outside circle, look at the placard boards with all these diagrams. There's a few, there's some multiple representatives from Metrolinx or the engineering firm or whatever, and you're just supposed to speak to each one individually about their little part, and they give you donuts and coffee and you walk out the door. And they do what the H they want, they put on the signboards what they're going to do, and then they don't do it. There's no accountability, there's no minutes of meetings because there weren't any meetings.
We actually do have a working group right now with Metrolinx, and there are meeting minutes. And it is more, I would say, working with them and coming up with solutions.
Well, when there was the noise wall committee, there was. It was quite formatted. There were multiple, either the MP or the elected member was there, or their secretary, minutes supposedly were taken. All these things were, I even chose the design that we have here, which the brown tree and the green tree. What they wanted to put in was a solid wall with yellow glass at the top, bright yellow fluorescent glass. Anyway, I think
Just to
there's no
clarify,
accountability.
the working group that is in process right now is the Eglinton West Crosstown Extension. Is there still a working group for the regular, the rest of Eglinton West?
Yes, you went to a meeting.
This is where it gets complicated. There are working groups for Crosstown,
Okay.
but we have been told that the noise wall is not a Crosstown consideration.
No, it's a metro. It was
It's a Metrolinx Go UPX consideration, and that project ended 10 years ago. You can tell because, you know, that station has been there for 10 years, right? You see all the people getting on the train.
Can we say
right.
there is an opportunity to go to the next Metrolinx board meeting and complain? There's also a
Yeah.
city working group that's, I'm sorry, a city subcommittee that's been set up on the Ontario Line Transit. You might want to go there and say, look, this isn't the city's transit issue, this is a Metrolinx issue, but we need some help because they're not talking to us.
Sorry, Rick, could I, the next time you're talking to Darren Cooney, could you bring up the sound wall as well? And even as like number one, find out if he can find out where they're at with it, A, and B, use it as a further point to the fact that our community has asked for a number of things, from replanting the trees at Black Creek to the sound wall, and point out to him that if Metrolinx wants to build trust with our community, these are two items that have been asked for, have been promised, and I will do the same the next time I speak to Darren Cooney.
Okay.
And I think that that's something that we could do. That makes sense.
Darren Cooney is a director of community relations on the subways program, so not the GO stuff, but would be the route to get this message into the bureaucracy.
It seems like it has to be politically driven, though. Would it not have to be politically driven to actually,
The problem is that the Ford government has a majority.
but what about like the idea of making heat for the local MPP?
We never see.
But what about if the media were down there videoing the crap that you're talking about? It would make pretty compelling media to have visuals of what you're discussing. Have the trains right in your backyard with the,
They don't give a shit.
but if the media were to cover it, and if we had the negative response from the MPP, those two things together make a nice controversy. That's when you start getting more traction.
Well, I don't.
Not
I
you
would
particularly.
assume-
I know you're tired, but
I would assume that they have no intention of putting one up at all, because if they did, there would have been something by now.
which is why I'm saying if pressure could be put to bear on the MPP, get a response, and then take whatever response that is and leverage it with media coverage.
Whatever help can come my way, I'd appreciate. I was actually out of my house for 4 months. I couldn't even live there because of the vibrations and all the stuff that was going on. But the noise wall was supposed to be completed before the Pan Am Games in 2015, not 21. 2015.
Then 2021 was the next one.
And that
Oh,
was
you
before
said
they did all the construction.
Did you write the MPP, this new MPP?
No, listen,
Can you put what you said tonight into writing and then take it forward to the association to have a committee?
I think it's
Take it
probably
on.
been
Well,
recorded.
we've
here.
minuted it.
Yeah?
So Lorna, wasn't there an issue, if I recall, there was some issue about where the walls were supposed to be because they were in some people's private property?
Well,
Wasn't there-
Metrolinx said it was an encroachment issue.
Right.
Because some properties over the years had extended out back.
Yeah.
When I moved there, about the 10 feet behind the house was all open to all the neighbors at the back, and people played horseshoes out there at night.
Right.
It was sort of like community space. That whole space now has been excavated straight down, and that 10 or 12 feet that used to be horseshoes, or 15 feet, is platform already starts there.
So if you could draft
And
something,
some of the houses, like from my area going north, I'm at Bar Avenue going north, there was no encroachment. But from the area south, there was some encroachment, but I would say that that's irrelevant because the amount of space between the properties and the tracks extends considerably larger there because of the curvation in the tracks at that point.
Can you document this and put it in writing for the board to take the details forward? If you could do that, it would really, really help. And when you take a breath and get it onto paper, and then take it forward with the board, we'll take it on from there. Because right now, you're on your own, you gotta detail it in writing, and then things can happen.
Lorna, we can help you with that.
Yeah, I think what we might want to do is ask everybody who is suffering from a broken Metrolinx promise if they can document it, and then share that with other communities to see if we can get a list of, how many hundred broken promises do we have before current developments
It
even
sounds like
start.
this is also a safety issue though as well, and an urgent safety issue in the neighborhood,
yeah.
and a health and safety
Yeah, but
issue.
real safety's a joke. I mean,
Well, you can pick an issue and rather than dilute it, just focus on something where this sounds like a pretty darn long-lived bad
Yeah.
issue that could be
Ma-
taken
ma-
on
ma-
as a
Mary,
simple
we
issue.
have trains full of chlorine falling off the tracks and, thousands of people being evacuated. I don't think they're really that concerned about a hole in the fence.
Well, it's not a hole in the fence.
Kids are getting
It's-
killed on the train.
There is no fence between Eglinton and Black Creek.
Yes, I understand that, but nobody's been killed here. They do
Yeah.
something as soon as somebody gets killed, like they did in Mississauga at Cawthra, where 2 people got killed on the same section of track within a matter of weeks.
It's not
That
to say
seems
that
to be
you
what
want
they
us to
react
wait
to.
that long. We need to take action.
Well, we need to.
Well, there's clearly health issues that are impacting you and all the neighbors on your street and
Well,
in
the
your area.
newer residents have been told over the years by real estate that the noise wall will be built.
Well, you've got a whole street of people that would sign a petition, but we need to get the issue clarified in writing.
That's,
Okay, so petition as
homework
well
now.
is possible.
Don't take your time. Take your time. Not everybody can visualize.
Just
it.
getting back to the working group Rick was talking about, there's a working group Metrolinx has called, I think there's now been 4 meetings, about the extension of the LRT West. At the last meeting, which was over at LEF, there were about 6 community members and there were about 26 Metrolinx staff, including engineers and so on. Yesterday, it's organised by a consulting company, and Darren Huang is the main guy who organises it. He called us, Simon and I, yesterday to get feedback on the meetings, because they're asking the people who've been at the meetings whether we're satisfied, whether they can be improved and so on. One of the main things that everyone else who've been to these meetings had already been interviewed, and one of the main things was that there aren't enough community members. I mentioned the fact that we have a member of our board who unfortunately isn't here tonight, Queenie, who lives in the Emmett apartment buildings. When we've spoken to them about what is happening, there are loads of people in those apartment buildings who know nothing about what is coming through Emmett Park, nothing about the fact there's going to be a concrete bridge coming through there and trees all chopped down. So I was recommending that because Darren Huang was asking, are there other community groups we should contact? And Neeland and others had already said, how about the sports groups? How about the cricket teams? How about the soccer teams, the tennis people who use they haven't been consulted either, as the Indigenous group weren't consulted, despite the fact that they have their lodge down there. And so I said, well, I could contact Queenie, I could give her contact information, see if we can get people from Emmett, but we need more community people to come to these working groups. Unfortunately, they're talking about restoration, which is what are we going to do after we've built the concrete bridge and chopped all the trees down? Where can we plant some more trees for you? And so on, which is less than ideal, because we would like them to do something other than build a concrete bridge through Eglinton Flats. But we do need more community people to attend, and they're about every...
I don't think it's
No.
open though without an invite.
That's
Well,
the
I could,
Yeah, it is.
that,
Stupid right there.
Well, I mean, but they have like open houses for the community at large, but
No,
they
but
can't be
they-
an open
there's
invite for
been-
everyone.
They
But
don't
the
mail
cons-
out.
They don't mail out.
They don't mail out.
I got one in the mail for the open house.
Yeah, but they
Not the
mailed out
open house.
1,000.
Yeah,
Not the
I did.
working, no, the
No,
working.
no, the working
meeting.
group.
No, no,
He's
no.
asking for
The working-
feedback
yeah.
about
Oh.
members to be part of the work, because there's been complaints that so few, I mean, there were more
Well, they
people.
invite quite a few, but a lot don't
Yes,
show up.
they turned up to the first meeting, because I
Right.
know Stacey represented the BIA. He's
Mhm.
got the, the martial arts studio just south of West Eglinton. Anyway, so not as many had turned up, unfortunately. But I mentioned the point, there's nobody from Emmett. So if there are other people who want to be, I mean, I don't see why I can't put forward, we as MDCA can't say, well, how about inviting X, Y, and Z, here's their contact information, so that we get more
I
community
put forward
members.
Anna Louise actually, but I think they said no to her too.
You put
Anna
forward
Louise, I was
Oh, yeah?
wanting Anna Louise. Well, she's very
Yeah.
knowledgeable about flood mitigation, so I thought she'd have a good voice in that
Right.
sense.
So they pick and choose as
So
to
they
who
said
they
no.
want.
Well, it's because
Could
the
I
group had already
jump in?
started at that point, so
Sorry.
the point of a working group is that it's the same members going onward, and it's kind of like relationships are building, where if people are just joining in at different steps of the working group,
Oh, I see.
it kind of defeats the purpose of a working group.
But we-
That's why.
You
Well,
can
we've been
still summarize what
fighting-
you've
to
done so
clarify
far.
that, we've
Sorry,
been fighting for
Newland
more
wants to
community
say.
members at every working group. And Councillor Nunziata has actually been pretty helpful in getting other community members into the meetings. So I understand that, and I understand that Metrolinx is projecting that they want to have a cohesive group that works together. But as Judith is saying, there was one meeting where it was me and 3 others with a bus full of Metrolinx and city staff going through the parks, and me basically saying, so you're gonna destroy all these trees and you're gonna do this over here, and then having 20, so I know that Anna Louise, she works with us too. I think that she wasn't refused, I think she's just declining because she doesn't have time.
Oh, she is declining now.
And then, but we did have another member from under her umbrella group, under the Black Creek Alliance, I think it was.
Is it?
No, Tanya is also too busy, but she also works with us. But all to say is, if there's somebody or a community group who wants to participate in the working group, we can help make that happen.
Yeah.
Whether we have to just show up with you and insist that they accept you, or we contact Councillor Nunziata ahead of the meeting. There are ways to get other people, and we would appreciate more voices in those meetings expressing concern and expressing their dissatisfaction.
Darren's
I
was open
should, if
to
I can
having more
clarify as
community
well, it was proposed to us in September that we put together people, connectors list. It was a list of initially 10 people we had to negotiate to get people on. Once we did that, they expanded it to 15 people. And they basically came in with the Metrolinx Knows Best presentation. Right, this is what we're getting, we're asking you for the color of the paint.
And the indigenous
Not the
community.
agenda. So what we need to do is 2 things. One, figure out, do they have a maximum number of people that they're inviting? Who are they inviting to the working group? And what's the function of the working group? Because if it's to repair the damage, then we want to take a step back from that before damage happens. And let's talk about the options for least impact, because they haven't talked to us about that yet. That's just been a fait accompli decision that they've been telling us for 2 years. Oh, we'll come talk to you, we'll come talk to you. Oh, we hear you, you just don't listen.
So if I can be brutally honest, I would say the first meeting of the working group was the most unproductive, and honestly felt like a complete waste of my time because nothing happened. It's just like the groups against the elevated track saying we don't want the elevated track, but Metrolinx is literally at the stance like this is what's happening. You're here to obtain some community benefits or have a say in the design and the pieces you can have a say in. So like to be honest, I think it will be less productive if we get people who are just going to say, no, we don't want this, we don't want this, when Metrolinx has stated very clearly, the working group, if you're going, is to say, I'm okay with it being elevated, and like, let's have a
So
productive conversation.
What they're doing is they're trying to organize a working group that will support their project.
Well, no, they're literally, yeah, they are saying this is what's happening, so let's have a discussion about what's going to happen. And just if we're just going there and saying, no, we don't want this, there's nothing productive happening, in my opinion.
At the first working group, ENAG pulled off it at the end after recognizing that there were criteria that were used in order to select. An environment was on that list, but it wasn't the priority. And as far as the environment criteria, the project that they're planning there's two other options in terms of the approach, which are better environmental approaches. End of story for ENAGB. They said, don't use us as your greenwash, essentially. Don't use our name attached to this plan. We don't believe in what you're doing.
Something else that bothered me about this, and which is why I'm not involved in the working group, I still have connections at the Conservation Authority, where I've been a community volunteer on behalf of MDCA for decades and was a board member at TRCA for 8 years. So I actually know a lot of their senior management on first name basis. I met with their director of planning in February and was told that TRCA hasn't seen the restoration plan. So I asked myself, how can Metrolinx be forming a working group to discuss remediation
Without TRCA?
when the Conservation Authority hasn't said what's going to be damaged and what needs to be done?
So the TRCA was at the last meeting.
Yes.
And they said that's kind of how the project runs. The restoration plan is always the last thing to be decided, but it was the city official speaking to that point and saying that's how every project is ran, and there's still a commitment by Metrolinx to get to that point.
Yes.
It just can't be decided until it gets there, if that makes
But
sense.
TRCA hasn't seen the plan
Because there's no plan yet.
because there's no plan.
But
So
that's just how
we're going
projects-
to
all
meet
projects
to
work.
talk about
That's
restoration
not how
of
all projects work. That's just
the
That's
pollutant.
what-
seeing how
No, that
all
was the city
projects-
official said that. It was the
Okay.
city.
So it's a procedure. Now remember, 15 years ago, when we had an environmental assessment, we had the environmental assessment before the plans were designed for the crosstown. And that environmental assessment talked about the people who lived here, the natural environment, the goals of the community,
And the
and
nice
the
bridge
impacts.
we were going to have across Black Creek Drive,
Yeah.
remember?
And all of this was done up front. And we were talking with the Conservation Authority before there was a drawing of what it would look like.
Not after.
This time, we're saying, well, you get to pick, do you have maple trees or birch trees after we've decided if you get maple trees or birch trees. No, we're going to decide, you can talk about it today, which you prefer, but we're not going to decide till TRCA says what's appropriate. So you're asking us to say, we approve of what you're doing, but we don't know what you're doing. And that just upsets
I
a
don't
lot
even
of
think they
people.
want our approval. I think they're just
Yeah.
going.
Basically,
They don't need our approval,
it's
really.
consensus building around a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I just jump in real quick here? You're right, Metrolinx wants to talk about community benefits, but that's us giving up, is just saying, okay, we're gonna just let them build right through the park. So my approach with Metrolinx at every single, and I've been to every working group meeting and I've been to every consultation meeting, has been, our community deserves community benefits and a better project. That's the approach that I feel we should be taking. And that's the approach that Stop the Trains in our parks is taking. And we don't think that our community should just say, okay, we're gonna accept the daycare and we're gonna accept a new splash pad in Piran Park, but we're also gonna destroy that whole stretch of urban forest. So I would say that our group is not giving up on that. And we argue that Metrolinx has studied multiple options. They've costed out multiple options. They know exactly how to go underground. They know exactly how to go at grade. They can mine it, they can bore it, they can cut and cover underground. All of that information is there. And so our group and our Indigenous allies, we're not giving up. And our Indigenous allies are performing ceremonies in the park every 4 days for the trees. They have a sacred fire going. My group is in contact with some of the groups from the Ontario line, including the Bold Coalition. We're in contact with some of the groups from the Don River system, including Bring Back the Don. We're trying to work together to put much pressure on Metrolinx as possible. We've reached out to a few lawyers and a few legal options. We're looking to challenge Metrolinx potentially in court. There's a couple of options there. We're looking to challenge them on the consultation piece. To your point, Judith, we think that none of the apartments, not a single apartment within Mount Dennis, we would argue, has ever received a consultation notice. And in our mind, that would break the consultation rules of the province and of Canada. And so that's an approach that we're looking at. It's also a matter of, it's not a matter of equity. So only homeowners, only people who own their own homes get a say in consultation. And even the say that we got wasn't a say. It was a, here's a fait accompli. So I hear you, and community benefits absolutely are important. We want Pier and Park to be better. We want the baseball diamond to be better. We want the splash pad. We want the community benefits that Metrolinx and a project like this can bring. But that doesn't mean that we make a deal with the devil and we give up. And NAGB, our Indigenous partners, they have been flat out offered cash payments and their own community benefits, which they have turned down every single time because they want to protect the parks and the system. And I would say, as their partners, and for my group, speaking for my group, STOP, we agree with that, and we think it's important, and even as a precedent, we're telling developers who are building 50 stories at no frills, we're telling LEF who wants to build 19 stories right here at the end of our street.
That would be a small one.
And that's the smallest one that's coming. We're telling them that, yes, Mount Dennis wants development, we want expansion, we want these things, but that doesn't mean that you can just come in and throw up whatever you want. You can't just walk over our community. We're saying that Mount Dennis is a community for growth, it is a community for new residents, but we also care about it and we want it to be built right. So that's what I would just say is I hear what you're saying about community benefits, and as the #1 person who gets in the way of making their meetings go forward, I would say
you weren't that bad last time. No, just kidding.
I'm going to keep doing that, and that's where I feel like I'm strong on that stuff. And for media, I've been on Metro Morning. We've done when we did our protest in January 9th, we were on every major television channel. We were on every radio channel on their rotation. Shauna Hunt from City TV has interviewed Cynthia Bell, the executive director, and myself 3 times now, and she's following the issue. If the chainsaws are coming for our trees, she's going to bring out a TV crew. I can't speak to the sound wall, but I will look into that and learn about that. I will learn about that. That's a new issue for me. But I think that all ties into, we can't trust Metrolinx.
No, absolutely.
We can't trust them because they promised trees on Black Creek, they promised a sound wall, they've promised, even when they promised us community benefits, I don't believe it. I don't believe that and unless we push them, they're not going to follow through with it. And the only way that we can push them is doing what we're doing, is trying to stop them here in Pier and Park, which I guess, just to give everybody a quick update on Pier and Park, the tree removal permit has been issued, and the first 200 trees in Pier and Park and on the eastern bank of Fergie Brown could be removed with 2 days' notice at any time for Metrolinx. And so basically, the only thing that's stopping them right now is our Indigenous partners, their TPs, and the Sacred Fire. And I can tell you that by having a Sacred Fire and conducting the ceremony, that's what's keeping Metrolinx at bay. If we were Josh Matlow, the city councillor, who was threatened with a fine for getting in the way of the trees at Osgood Hall, if we were at him, those trees would be gone right now. It's our Indigenous partners and what they're doing, which is what has saved those trees to date. I think Rick would agree with me that Metrolinx had actually hoped that those trees would be down by now. So I would say that with our support, our Indigenous allies have done tremendous work, and we're hoping to build on that. And we're hoping that we're going to force Metrolinx to come back to the table and speak honestly and give the Mount Dennis Community Association, the Mount Dennis Eco Neighborhood Initiative, our Indigenous allies at NAGB, and my group, Stop the Trains, an opportunity to actually provide true consultation into the design of the project and not just on the restoration piece. So that's where we're at. I'm sorry I jumped in and
I was done talking.
yeah.
Neil, what's happening about the time limit with regard to when the birdies come?
So I read the arborist report, and unfortunately the migratory bird deadline of it, so just to catch everyone up, there was a thought that if they didn't cut the trees by the April 1st migratory bird deadline, that they would not be able to cut trees until August after the migratory bird season. According to the arborist report, that's actually not true. It just makes it a little bit more difficult, and what they would need is an arborist to go through the forest, look for migratory birds' nests. If they don't spot any migratory birds' nests, they can issue a 2-day tree removal permit, and Metrolinx would have 2 days from that time to remove those trees. If they do see a migratory bird's nest, then they would have to wait.
Who's good at putting nests?
Yeah.
Just move
Yeah, that's
around.
right.
I think Dave and Adam had a question.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering what, it's hard to catch up because there's so much information to gather in order to make good decisions on these things, obviously. What, in your opinion, is a good solution in terms of a good project, whatever that means, at the moment, to help me kind of catch up a little bit?
So my argument would be that it should go underground. I've been through their financial report on that, and in their 2020 initial business plan, going underground, they said it cost $1.2 billion more than the project that they have in place right now. So that's a big number, $1.2 billion.
Our government has no problem printing money.
But that also included 3 underground stations in Etobicoke that they're not building. And each one of those underground stations, based on the numbers, are about $300 million
But
each.
besides the money, it would literally have to go 10 stories underground.
Which they've done at Avenue Road.
Do you take transit?
They've done
There's
it
no
at-
way I'd be going 10
or
stories
they're
underground
going-
in a floodplain.
But if you're riding
Caledonia.
if you're riding the Eglinton Crosstown,
But I
you
just
will
mean
be.
I literally take
You will
transit to
be.
work every day, and even if the escalator is down and there's only 2
And-
flights, it's not fun, and I'm physically
And
active.
so, but the elevated guideway is 20 meters high.
I'm just
So
honestly
you're
saying
going
as someone
up.
who takes transit.
No, but I'm
Like,
saying.
I wouldn't even want to go
But what
down
I'm
there,
saying-
especially in a floodplain. I'm
I-
honestly not trying to argue, I'm just giving my point
And
of
what I'm
view.
trying to say is that if you're riding that, you're gonna be at those depths anyways, because that's where the rest of the project is at Caledonia, it's 25 meters.
No,
At
30.
Avenue Road, it's 32
We were down
meters.
there.
But
Mike and
this, like, I'm just saying the stop to go 10 feet under,
And that's
in a
those
floodplain
stops,
is what I
those-
mean.
But, so they can totally, I've spoken to the engineers, they can totally build this project underneath the river and underneath the floodplains. There is absolutely no reason why they couldn't do it. The big challenge would be that it would take a year longer.
Was your, the Native allies, their recommendation seemed to be bad idea, water or something or other, you said aquifers or whatever.
They want
Is
to be
that-
sure,
is
they
that
don't
in
trust.
conflict, or?
No, it's not in conflict because they just don't trust Metrolinx data. That's where they're at. And so they want an environmental assessment that's conducted under an Indigenous lens.
Yeah.
And we're supportive of that.
As are we.
Right.
And so,
The follow-up to that is to take a look at the alternative approaches, because Metrolinx has already said that the bridge is not the best of the alternative approaches for environment.
So the hope
So
there
if it
is,
isn't the best, and they already know about the water issue,
yeah.
so we would like to do the Indigenous assessment in terms
Just
of
to-
an applied, what are the impacts of the different options and what's the recommendation coming out of that Indigenous review?
Also, in Metrolinx own data, the worst option in an extreme weather event isn't underground. It's the elevated guideway. That's the
Well,
worst.
yeah.
That's the
I
worst.
mean, a
in-
flood isn't an extreme weather.
Yes, well, Hurricane Hazel.
Right.
And so it's also the worst option from an environmental perspective. The only thing that matches the transit speeds that Metrolinx wants. So if they were to go at grade and have to stop at every right of way, which would be Jane, Emmett, Scarlett, that would slow their project down, and that's why they don't want to go at grade. But if you
Even
went,
at grade though, it would have, the road would still be extended and there would still be a lot of trees.
but again, that's
And less
Metrolinx
to
data that I've
use.
challenged them on, and I would say that actually isn't, you would maybe have to go into the forest a little bit, but we're talking
I
about,
would agree that they're
we're talking about 50 meters into the parks with this
Community
project.
benefits point of view, if it's above ground, we can make use for the space underneath it and have a say in what goes there, where it's just more concrete and also still affects.
You
what
walk
drains.
underneath any of these?
Can I
There's
respond to
nothing
that?
underneath any of these things.
Well, you can have a say in what we're going in.
I'd like to challenge, definitely like to challenge that one.
And
Because
actually,
what you're
part of their
talking about,
idea.
what you're talking about is the answer that was developed for 1950s expressway bridge problem
Right.
that Ken Greenberg brought into Toronto. And now they're saying keeping the repairs up for that bridge, which was built, what, 60 years ago? Keeping the repairs up for that bridge are too expensive for the city.
They're talking about
Okay,
Yeah.
so what we know is if they put a bridge up, it's gonna have a lifespan.
Right.
So why not think about that instead of putting the bridge up?
I think the Ottawa and Edmonton bridges are falling down before they're opening.
The maintenance costs for underground.
And the one in Scarborough, the East End that's above ground.
The problem is
Out there,
So-
yeah.
the chief engineer comes from an elevated transit background. It's what he knows, it's what he does, it's what he loves.
Well, it can
But
work
the engineers have
differently,
also
can't it?
won an award for going under Lake Ontario, building the pedestrian walking bridge to
the
Billy
island.
Bishop Airport.
Yeah.
So the, Arup has no problem doing, they're going underneath the Tobico Creek. They've gone under rivers and floodplains. They are eminently able to do this project. They've costed it out, they've studied it. I would say the two big challenges for going underground are one, that it would mean a longer construction horizon for us. And that's really it, and then potentially a small increase in cost.
Or to go underground and have a bridge across the number. Then they're
Yes,
not going to have to go
and
steep.
just so you know, the bridge is going to be 9 meters higher than the existing bridge over the Humber River. You're going to be looking, you're looking north.
9
You're not,
meters?
yes,
Yes.
it's going to be
Yes.
huge.
It's gonna be
And the
huge.
station is going to be 20 meters above. So you're not going to be walking up 2 flights to get to the station. You're going to be walking, it's almost just as high as it is, just as like Metrolinx brings all of these arguments out that you can't really accept at face value. That's the unfortunate thing here. And so yes, is underground not perfect? It's none of these options are perfect, but it definitely is by far the best for our community, and Metrolinx's own data says it's the best for our community. Sorry.
I have a point about flooding. A hurricane will take bridges out. Hurricanes do not
I
move
don't
tunnels.
just mean a hurricane though, I
No,
mean, if
but
it's in a
that's what will happen.
floodplain, it could
A
flood
hurricane
easily.
can take a bridge out. That bridge that's on, Eglinton's never been tested for that. It was put up in
Right.
1970.
Yeah,
When water goes across the Humber and there's a tunnel under there, that tunnel stays put. The water just goes right over top. All of this line is built so far underground, there's a whole sump system. It's constantly leaking. It never will stop because it's below the water table. There's sumps and pumps under for such things, right? They always have to pump it out. All those buildings downtown that are way down with underground parking, if they didn't have sumps running all the time, the water would slowly build right up inside. So there's no fear of that unless the pumps stop.
I'm just saying I wouldn't want to go down there, that's all. That's all I'm
It's
saying.
really good to have,
Sorry, can we-
it's good to have this kind of information exchange, because, some of us, and I hear in the media, I get this sense of a dichotomy of views between the proponents. So we have the Indigenous proponents, and we have the rest of the community who might see things a little bit differently at this point. But on the outside, you just see there's an argument amongst the one side. So this is how divide and conquer kind of works, isn't it?
Sure, but we're
So-
not divided. We're
But it would be
we're
good if we could
combined.
get the voices on one page, sort of.
Well,
Everyone's
If there
always
was a
gonna have a
way to
different
do an
opinion.
environmental assessment to the satisfaction of the Indigenous-led piece,
That's what they're asking.
then but if you could do it ahead of anybody agreeing to it, somehow do
Well,
an
and
independent
that's
one.
something that we're working on.
Because you need to
That's-
speed this whole thing
Rick
up.
is working on the framework, and we're looking at raising money to get moving forward, because at the end of the day, none of us want to slow down the project either. But I know you've been wanting to ask a question for some time, so I thought I would.
And I appreciate that. So in the Residents Association in Weston, we had to deal with Metrolinx for almost 2 decades. And I really believe they're just waiting this out. And here's, understand the timeline that I see from what I'm reading from posts. So Kenny, their fastest tunneler right now, which is way ahead, it is past the halfway point last month. And so it made it there, okay, halfway in 11 months. So in 10 more months, it will be out. And so you probably only have 6 months to change its trajectory if you want to go below the Humber River. Understand that timeline. If you miss that timeline, they're going to tell you, we can't back a tunneling machine up and redirect it. So
There's
just
angles involved in all of this.
well, they like, oh yeah, you gotta get under.
You gotta start angling down when
Yeah,
you.
but understand that timeline. You probably only have 6 months
Yeah.
to get them to change.
And we know, we're like, we felt under the gun.
Well, but as long as everybody understands, oh, yeah.
No, fair enough.
I mean, I used to do a bunch of stuff in marketing, and focus groups were a really big deal. And you want feedback on something like new brand for your Cheeto package or whatever.
Sure.
Then you pay people $100 and they show up for 2 hours. You know what I mean? And a lot of people will show up for 2 hours. So if you want an effective working group, is there a way for these guys or some kind of government grant to like incentivize people? Like, who's making big money around here, right? People are trying their best to make it happen. Maybe there's a way to make these things more effective if you want a truly effective working group. I don't know who to talk to about that. But
So incentives for participating on the.
Can I just make a point about, Neelan was talking about extra costs of burying it. They found 2 billion to bury it in Etobicoke, because the residents of Etobicoke were consulted and they all said they wanted it buried. And we know which premier lives in Etobicoke. Right? So they find the money for certain groups, then they come to Mount Dennis and tell us it's got to be elevated.
Is there any way to work with the community groups on the west side of the Humber, all those high-rise condos? There's a lot of people over there.
They're all getting it underground and they're all happy.
So maybe
That was
we need
raised
to
up-
involve them, because there's a lot of people that are right by that stretch of the park.
That was raised at the staff meetings a couple of months ago. And there was a discussion about it. The decision was that takes the focus away from trying to get Metrolinx to come to the table on a negotiation for the segment. So
But
in
just to
terms
bring
of the other
two
side of the
sides-
river, the segment is Mount Dennis Station to the portal, which is about
But the parkland is shared by the two
which is
sides.
about 500 meters west of Scarlet Road. It takes in some of the Scarlet neighbors, but not the people out of Kipling. If it gets to the point where tunnel is considered, then you've got to change the angle of the existing tunnel, which would mean talking to people out there, right? It would be necessary. So yes, short statement is we need some connection out there. It's not the immediate priority. The immediate priority is to get Metrolinx back to the negotiating.
I mean, we're trying to connect with any community group that wants to partner with us. I would say that we've delivered thousands and thousands of flyers throughout the community ourselves. We've done it by hand through Dawn's help and other people in the group. So we're always interested in connecting, and we're always trying to connect and bring more people into our group. We always want more help. We always want more participation. So to your point, we're trying. It's not always as simple as saying we're going to connect with groups. One of the things that we found is it's hard to get into those apartment buildings. It's hard to get into those condo buildings. It's hard to get a message to them. They're locked buildings with locked mailboxes. It's really easy for us to walk up and down the streets and get to the houses and put a flyer into the mailbox. But so we're always eager to connect with other people and hear from them. And we're trying to build a big, we've got 6 different groups in our coalition now with the Mount Dennis Community Association, and we'd love to expand that. So. Yeah.
Have you reached out to Acorn at all? Have you worked with Acorn? Because they have a lot of members in these apartment buildings, and I know that the one on Eglinton, right there, they're very involved with. But I imagine they're involved with quite a few apartment buildings and as well. I can send you their contact.
I would love that, actually. Thank you.
I think Michelle, who's in the Eglinton apartments, I think she's been at the.
Definitely, they've been doing a lot. Acorn's been doing a lot of work on those Eglinton apartments recently.
Yeah.
Because of support network.
That would be great. Thank you. Yeah.
Is Janessa still in the neighborhood? She used to be the super over there. Janessa? Oh, yeah.
Will the expansion of the raised rail affect the Emmett Community Garden?
Oh, right.
I'm not sure is the short answer. I don't think so.
Because there's quite a group around that
Yes.
related to food share and seniors groups and whatever.
I don't think that they're going to have to remove any of the community garden. I don't think it will go to that, but how will the sound, I mean, it's going to be very close to it's going to be within 50 to 100 meters of the community garden. So how that's going to change the community gardens and the feel, I just don't know. I don't have a great answer.
I brought it up a couple of times. I'm sort of tangentially involved with that.
Yes.
There doesn't seem to be an awareness either through Food Share LEF or the people at the Emmett Gardens that there's going to be any disturbance to them at all.
If I can say, LEF, one of the partners that we have is Edge of the Bush. Edge of the Bush is Hokie Martin. Dr. Hokie Martin is the Indigenous advisor to Peter Frampton, the executive director at LEF. So there is a relationship. It's not for, and they're doing some development in terms of the communities that are using LEF.
I would say if there's a way to connect with them, and if they say to help, again, part of our challenge has been doing exactly what you're talking about, is educating people in the neighborhood about the project, about what's happening, because it always comes back to that Metrolinx hasn't done a good enough job connecting with the community and explaining what is happening. So
Which is by design.
Which is by design. And so if there was a way to connect with those gardeners, I would love to be in touch with them, and I would gladly reach out to them and bring them up to speed and even ask them for their help if they were interested.
So,
The two options that really just diametrically opposed. You either go underground or you knock down 1,400 inch trees. There's no intermediary.
Well, it's going down the middle of the road, doing it at grade.
Well, maybe not at grade, but is there the ability to do elevated so that way you get...
You know, at the end of the day, if Metrolinx came back and said, here's a fifth option that's going to save 1,000 of these trees and transit times are going to be good, I would listen. I would absolutely, and I'm pretty sure Rick would listen, and I'm sure that our Indigenous partners would listen. And in many ways, that's all we're asking them to do, is to come back to the table with an alternative proposal that's going to save as many of our trees, save the parks as much as possible. And if they came to the table with that, we would all sit and listen. Like,
are both positions so entrenched at this point?
No,
because I know
theirs is very entrenched because they haven't moved one bit. And our position went from being only underground to now joining our Indigenous allies to say we want an environmental assessment. But I have, every time Metrolinx has reached out for a meeting, I've attended. Every time I have respectfully offered my thoughts and my opposition to their plan, and we've consistently said, the moment that you're willing to actually extend a hand of compromise, our hands are there to take it. And so I would say, I would greatly appreciate Metrolinx coming forward with a compromise option, but they haven't done that yet.
Do you find part of what you're fighting is you're not only fighting Metrolinx's entrenched position of going above grade and again knocking those 1,400 and change trees, but also kind of getting a unified. I imagine this is a friendly organization here, and still you're getting dissenting debates as to what the appropriate option should be.
I mean,
even from a marketing standpoint
Right.
as well. Stop the trains. You're going to get people who are going to accuse your organization of NIMBYism.
And that's something that we probably, I think, given hindsight, a year ago when we started it, we may have picked a different name, because that is definitely, absolutely, we've been accused of NIMBYism, and we've been accused of not wanting transit flat out, despite the fact that we
People
say,
don't usually read it in our parks.
No, exactly. So I would say that's a fair point.
So it's just trying to, how do you change the discourse? Right?
We do that by going out and talking to people, and we go to every community event. We have a booth. We go to every Metrolinx event. We talk to people. We explain to them as much as we can. We deliver flyers to the neighborhood. We have social media accounts.
And from a support standpoint, in terms of not to use social media as
Sure.
a barometer, but do you get a lot of pushback? Or?
We don't actually get a lot of pushback. You know what? In fact, our group, we've now had 47 meetings in the last year, and we've been active out at the party on the pond, at every event, and I can tell you very confidently, 99 out of 100 people we've talked to have supported, have at the very least been appalled at Metrolinx plans, and if not, have been very supportive of what we're doing. We've sat out in front, we've gone to the cricket games and handed our flyers to every cricket player, and they were all uniformly appalled at the plan. We've talked to the Jamaican community who are there barbecuing and playing dominoes. Again, they were all uniformly appalled with the plan. We've gone out to the community. So I would say that, again, this all goes back to the problem that we've faced, which is educating the community to the project, telling them about the actual impact. I mean, Metrolinx didn't release the tree number until February 28th. Like that's a month ago. How can you argue that you've made a proper consultation to a community when you haven't even released the arborist report to the community, let alone the GRCA fully restoration plan? I would say proper consultation would show a community start to finish restoration plan and give them an opportunity on the design. So
I'm in agreement with you, and not because I appreciate you.
And out there on the we only started a year ago, and we've definitely made mistakes along the way. Maybe Stop the Trains wasn't the best name, but it seemed to it worked great when we were starting the group. So, but we're a small community group, and we're always open to suggestions and ideas and new energy. And
Was there not a secondary plan that involved a different approach, cutting down fewer trees, coming out at a lower elevation?
No, we have
originally
asked,
in the planning world, urban design policy was not to put transit lines through parks. And then when it went to council last summer as an update from the Transit Expansion Office, and people said, you're putting it through the parks. And the mayor was going, well, I was told it was on the boulevard. And it went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Metrolinx has told the city, not the city is telling council, it's Metrolinx has told the city, and the city staff are relaying that to council, that Metrolinx is building on the boulevard, when in fact the city knows full well that they're going through the park. Urban design has changed its guidelines because Metrolinx has said, how do we get from here to there? And it's our act, Building Transit Faster or whatever it's called, that supersedes your right to say no.
There was a second issue that had to do with the bike path, and there was one thing, if you could get any play, it seemed to me that because the city had already spent $1 million on the bike path,
Right.
that they didn't want to take it out and move it on the other side of the road, and therefore we had to go out another 50 feet further into the trees, and if only they would relocate the bike path, we could at least save 50 feet.
The bike path has nothing to do with their plan.
But the head engineer talked about the fact that the bike path was essentially causing an additional easement because you can't have a bike path abutting the transit. So in other words, it had to go an additional 50 feet further into the park. So if we're gonna have all the trees cut down, presumably you could have 50 feet times the distance, fewer trees cut down, because you'd be moving the alignment closer to the existing roadway.
But if that's true, you could also do that at grade, right? So maybe there's some way to get to tunnel it past Fergie, tunnel it closer to Jane Street or on the other side of Jane Street.
So that was the other aspect. When we had our first meeting, we asked if we couldn't start the tunneling further down the slope, and also to move the bike path over so that you would then have less of an impact. So there seemed to me a middle ground that was already established in that first meeting, but then it's been dissipated by the presumably reasonable desire to put it underground, which is sounding like it's already too late because the digging's already happening on the west side. So I wonder if we should focus on a compromise solution from the get-go, because we're out of time, and if we want to get something to change, maybe look for that small win, which would be, yes, the city would have to redevelop the bike path at a cost, but if this is what I understood from the problem, at least we could save another 50 feet of easement.
I mean, I've been at every meeting and the bike path causing this much of a disruption to the project. I would say respectfully, this is the first that I'm really...
I asked a lot of questions at that
You've
first
had a
meeting.
separate consultation group that we've had.
It was before that your group, it was at the very, very beginning. It was the very first meeting we had. And that's what I asked as many questions as I could to...
This would be for the Scarlet Woods Park, the Scarlet Woods Golf Course.
You go lower down Peary, you go under Peary, and you don't take it all out because you don't need all that to park your trucks.
Sorry, the group that was at your
Yeah.
meeting, who was the community?
You guys were all, everybody was there. Everyone who was...
This was the evening meeting.
The first walk we
yeah,
had and
yeah,
the first
yeah,
talk we
yeah.
had with Metrolinx
Yeah.
and the
Okay.
I asked a lot of specific questions, and it seemed to me that this was if nothing else could change, because the guy seemed absolutely determined not to tunnel. And I thought, well, that's not going to happen because of the way he was entrenched. But what could be changed and what would make sense, but it's between the city and the province, so you got a problem. Because the city's already done its bike path.
The city has no...
The city doesn't want it next to the road.
And the city really has no, I would say, the city has absolutely no say or power or anything.
But because it's already there, the design has happened
But it's-
around the existing bike path
This
design,
is
which would have to be
all-
revisited.
I suppose, but what I'm trying to say is that the province had its own plan, and they're going ahead with their own plan, regardless of what when we went to city council, Mayor Tory filed a motion on our behalf, asking Metrolinx to come back to the table with options for change. That was the language of his motion, and it was unanimously.
It's easier to do nothing and to say we can't do anything, so, but I really dig down
my point
on
is-
what could be
My point is
some
that
win.
Simon and I spoke at city council to the mayor, and he filed a motion based on our comments that was unanimously accepted by city council, asking Metrolinx not to go underground. Didn't ask any of those things. It just simply said, asking Metrolinx to come back to the city with options for change. Which would have
Mike was there as
been,
well.
and Mike
Yeah.
was there as well, and which would have been, that's where we would have gotten into the compromise
They don't want to have
options.
to open a can of
And
worms.
Metrolinx ignored it. Francis Nunziata filed a similar motion, and just like they're doing in Osgood. So what I'm saying is the bike lane and stuff like that
Well, just-
is a bit of
just
a
so you
red
know-
herring. Is a bit of a
No,
red herring.
I'm saying that it might have been the very solution that would have made the most sense in the end, but that has been lost in the shuffle.
It was
So you might
presented,
want
it was,
to ask about
options were
it.
presented to them in the fall after that meeting.
No, just find out what I'm talking
We-
about, and
We did deputations to their
could
board.
be a
To say
small
that
window
you need
there.
to talk to the community about the planning and take a step back from this project.
Guys, I'm hugely admirable of your guys' stamina. This is amazing. You guys can go on like this on this issue, and I get that it's a very big issue, a lot at stake, a lot of money, a lot of emotion. Are there any other items on the agenda that we could maybe tackle a little bit smaller? Like, in many ways, my whole life has been putting on a helmet and running into a brick wall. Something like, how do we get newsletters going again? Or how do we motivate small businesses? Or how do we connect small neighborhood groups? I don't know, just something that seems a little more, we can actually do something here, and you really smart people who are really invested in this can keep on that thing. Yeah.
My suggestion is we do a time check. What time is it?
Time to go home.
It's time to go home. That we do, if people are interested in the next board meeting, can other community people come to the board meeting? Can we continue for the discussion for what else, what are the other functions of the organization?
Do you want to do anything? What do you want to do?
I don't know, I just got here.
Sign up for marketing, did you hear?
That was 10 years ago.
He's got Cheetos on
He
his
wants to
mind.
get the newsletter going.
The next board meeting is in 2 weeks. I
Okay.
think that is too soon to expect to bring on board new board members.
Sorry, who got just elected? I just didn't, because the names were quick. Who are the new people on the board?
I guess I was one of them.
Okay.
Yes, you were.
Okay.
You're one of them too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. So nice new faces.
So we got some communications people,
Awesome, yeah,
okay?
yeah.
If you want to talk to Jonah,
Don and I used to do the newsletters back in the day.
Great.
And it was fashionable. But then again, we have to move on from print now
Yeah.
to more the website, and we haven't really gone.
is there somebody here who's interested in finance issues? Going once, going twice, okay, Guy?
Yeah, to get the money guy on.
Okay. So we now have Adam and Guy.
Did Guy say yes?
I do know finances.
Different Adam for
Adam.
finance and
Okay,
Guy
yeah.
for finance. Any other functions that we need people to stick up their hand?
I'm
We need
still
more
curious
people
about-
on the working groups.
Which working group?
The Metrolinx working group for the
Yeah,
extension.
that's going back to
West.
Metrolinx, and we're trying to move this
I'm just
into other
wondering if
functions of
anybody-
the organization.
I'm going to speak to Darren Hung in the next 2 days.
Okay.
And I can give him, so if anybody wants to give him Queenie's contact information, try and get more people from Emmett. So if there's anybody here who wants to be on the working groups, we can give their contact info.
Okay, could you talk to, just rather
Yeah,
than
the next meeting
think
is
about it,
next
talk to
Wednesday.
Judith.
It's next Wednesday.
Are there
the
other
next meeting.
functions
Yeah.
of the organization that we need?
I'm also interested in the sort of the connections with the developers or the community benefits. We used to have all
So the
that.
planning
The
side,
planning side of things.
okay, the buildings, the built environment.
Right.
Are there people that are really interested in the built environment and the community plan that's been done and what the next stage of that's going to be?
Question.
Okay, we got 2, 3,
Of the train stuff by Karen Park, or what do you
no, this is the secondary
No
plan.
frills,
Oh,
city,
yeah. Oh, I'm interested.
Western.
Pictures of Mount Dennis was the consulting study. Half of the consulting
Land
study
use study.
became the secondary plan the council approved. There's still things out of that consulting study that planning wants to put to this council on heritage and culture and eco-neighborhood. But right now, the density issues, how high can the buildings, how dense can the buildings be on a site, those things have already got
In the
pushed to the province for approval. Okay, and now the developers in the province and the city are kind of going back and forth on what's really approved and what's in the secondary.
Okay.
So that's critical right now because there's some developments that are ready to grow if there's an official plan for them to go through.
Which is
I'm
being
interested in
appealed.
that part.
Anyway,
And he looks.
Last question?
Join, yeah.
Just a quick question for clarification. I understood, well, I don't know, this is what I'm asking. With this recent pronouncement from Ford about these zones around hub areas,
Yes.
it sounds like they can go up to 50 stories within a kilometer of the center of the hub. Is that correct?
There's different levels of density depending on what your transit connections are. So in Mount Dennis, we've got a number of major connections, which allows for density and height up to a certain level. It's not the top, that would be like Union Station, and they're trying to get the airport.
But in No Frills, they're going up to 59 stories there. At this point.
What No Frills proposal is from Choice Properties, which is the developer that the Weston's family is part of, is for it to be developed in that parcel to be developed in 3 blocks. There'll be the corner block with 3 towers on it and a 5-story podium. I'm not clear that the towers are 40 stories?
Well, I did the math at one point, and with the podiums, some of the podiums I think are 12. Anyway,
Yeah.
and I understand Hollis has put in a new thing to go from 33 to 43 stories.
In the interest of shortening this discussion, because it's...
So my latest news is 7 towers and a total of 2,356 units.
That's
Up to
that's
59
for the
stories.
complete 3-block development, and they're going forward with the first block. They want to get that into place. But what we're talking about is needing to get accurate information out to the community, is what I hear you saying, and following up on that issue.
It's 9 o'clock.
I don't think there's any information. Simon has an announcement to make, and then we're shutting it down.
Thank you. Some of you may know that every year I lead a series of Saturday morning cleanups, community cleanups.
Yes.
And they will be on the they will be starting this coming Saturday, and continuing for the following 4 Saturdays after that, so 5 Saturdays altogether. It's only from 10 a.m. till noon, although some people hang around till 1 o'clock, and I'm always happy when there's more. But that will be happening. We will be sending out exact details, but almost certainly the first one will be starting at basically starting at the first one will be at James Street,
Nice.
North of Eglinton.
north of Eglinton, running up as far as Brownville, and we'll be doing both sides of James Street plus the street or the street opposite. That's what we've done regularly in the past. The following week will be on this side of the community, running along the edge of the valley, from starting just north of Eglinton, and just near where the tent is now, and running up as far as Sunnybreak, where Judith has a tradition of always providing refreshments for anybody who's there. And the other 3 will follow. I will send people details, but as many people as can come out will be appreciated.
Lemon squares,
Lemon squares, Judith.
Yes, Judith's lemon squares are famous.
that'll get them coming. You have something to show us on your computer?
Okay, thank you, everybody. We can go home.
Literally came from.
This is the, just in case anybody wants, the way that the library is gonna be activated for the contact. So it's a local artist too. And he took a lot of the photos are from the Kodak.
Yep.
So we're gonna be.
So those are the windows that have the stickers on. Oh, that's the billboard.
That's the billboard and then.
Do you want to add anything to the chart?
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it right on the side.